Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and in this episode we are back working on the brakes. Alright, so those of you who were following last week will have seen that I started working on a twin master cylinder adjustable brake bias pedal setup for my Alfa 105. If you want to catch up with that, I'll put a link up above, and if these are the sort of videos you're liking, please think about subscribing. It does help us out. Moving forward, basically what we've got is, this is actually what Colin Byrne designed up, this sort of mount for the adjustable brake bias dual master cylinder setup that I've been working on, and I was very happy with my work on the lathe. There were a few comments where people were still giving me heaps about my work on the lathe, and there were some good suggestions about spring-loaded chuck keys, because I keep having the issue of forgetting the chuck in the chuck of the lathe, which is extremely dangerous, because if you turn it on with the chuck in the lathe, it can fly across the room and do a lot of damage, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to get better, I am. So before I get back into that today, I have a very exciting delivery that just turned up a couple of days ago. So I've been working with a guy named Chris for a couple of years now, actually. In the background, we've been talking together. He actually builds custom brakes, and we were actually originally going to be building them for my my 240Z, but as many of you know, I ended up selling it before we could do anything, and he graciously offered to switch it over and do it onto the Alfa. And some of you might have been worried that with all this engine power, obviously with the Ferrari engine in the car, it's going to be a lot faster, and we might not have enough brakes. That's not going to be an issue. Look at these babies. So these are custom 6-pot front calipers for the Alfa, and they go together with, like, man, these are some brakes. Yeah, so these are all custom hats, these are 300mm discs, massive vented brake discs with these huge 6-pot calipers on the front, and the rears have not been forgotten, because he's developing up some very, very cool custom 4 pots for the rears. Now these things are so nice. Thank you very much to Chris at Carbon 12 Racing. He actually has a Mexico Blue 911 similar to Harry, and he does these brakes for them as well. It's a bit overkill for Harry, but if you've got a lot more power than I do, then these would definitely be the go. On the Alfarrari, these are a must. So I am very happy. These will fit just underneath the wheels I've got. So I am over the moon. These are a very, very nice bit of gear. Well, I think we better get back to making the pedal setup so I can actually power these things. All right, so for those who missed it last week, I'll just quickly go over what I'm doing here again. So this setup that Colin Byrne designed takes a dual master cylinder. So it's got one master cylinder sitting in here. Coming through this way, we have an arm. Last week I machined up this sort of center pivot with a couple of bronze bushings that fit in the center here. The next step I need to do is I need to weld these 2 individual arms to this center sleeve, and to get that width right, I've got my M8 rod end. Interestingly, in America, I think these are hind joints. Other places they're known as rose joints. In Australia, they are known as a rod end, but same thing, different name. Because when I first went looking for these things, I'd only watched American videos and try to call them a hind joint or a rose joint, and they looked at me funny. So if you try to buy these in Australia, they're a rod end. Anyway, I'm going to bolt this in here and get the spacing right for my my bits here, and I can start welding it up. All right, so hopefully this starts to make a bit of sense now. I need to actually adjust in the these master cylinders a little bit more so that this arm is a little bit lower, but basically it takes a bit to press it, but that is how the brakes are going to act. So this arm is going to go off to the pedal, and when you press on that actuates the brakes, and then you've got the balance bar here, and basically depending on where the pivot point is where the brake bias is, so which master cylinder gets more pressure from your foot. So that's what I've got in the 911. It works great. I've managed to balance the brakes nicely so that it doesn't lock the fronts or the rears separately. It just locks the fronts just before the rears. That's how I've got it set up on the 911. That's how I like the brake bias set up. Next step, I think, would be welding this all together and making this all one solid piece. I'm happy with the layout now. It all works. So let's start welding. All right, so we have the whole unit completely welded up now. So we've got the dual master cylinder, the balance bar, everything is in there. That all is going to actuate the way it is supposed to. So now it's time to try and mount this under the car. All right, that is a nice solid mounting spot there. Using the factory bolts for the factory master cylinder. The last thing I'm going to do is the same thing that Colin did on his, is I'm going to make a brace going from the back of this unit up to this bar on the car here to just sort of triangulate it and give it a bit more rigidity so that when you stomp on the brakes, it doesn't move, it doesn't go anywhere. It's all that force is being held solid by the car. So let's start measuring up and making a brace. All right, so you can see here that the brake master cylinders are both all mounted up and everything is all in place. And I've added in this reinforcing bar. It's a piece of solid stainless rod going back to this piece of angle. I put a couple of captive nuts into the frame of the car, so it's all nice and solid now. So the next thing I have to do is start building a similar thing for the other side for the clutch master cylinder. I'm changing them all over to this type, which will become apparent in a minute. All right, so I set up my brake side and now I've also set up my clutch side. So I set up a... Sorry about the microphone issues with the unit in my pocket, but what I've done here is I've set up the clutch so I can get access through to the bolt holes and bolted on the other side of where the brake is. And this should be a nice strong unit to fit into the car. The brake will sit on one side of the rail, the clutch on the other side of the rail, as the factory does. I didn't go with the factory clutch master cylinder, mostly because of how I'm going to set up the reservoirs, and also I can change the size master cylinders to work with the slave cylinder that I'm currently using on the clutch, and also play around with the master cylinders to match up with the brakes. So the next thing I suppose I need to show you is what I'm doing with the reservoirs. Okay, so the reservoirs are all there, all coming out through the floor. It all fits nicely. I'm quite happy with the location. I still need a bit of cover over. There's still enough room for the seat to slide all the way forward and not interfere, so that is all good. And of course, it slides back all the way. So there's plenty of access. I think that's all I've got time for this week. I need to finish off connecting to the pedal and that sort of stuff. And there's more stuff I'm going to have to do with the pedals and stuff next week. So I think that means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, Enzo Ferrari revealed and raced his first car, the 125S, at the beginning of 1947. And then later that same year, he revealed his second model, the 159S. Only two of these cars were built, and they were basically the 125S, but with a bigger engine and a few minor cosmetic differences. The 1.5 V12 engine from the 125S was bored and stroked, which took it to 1.9 litres and took it up to 125 horsepower. This steel tube framed car had a 5-speed manual transmission with a transverse leaf spring in the front and a live axle rear end and drum brakes all round. That was until the 12th of October, when French driver Raymond Sommer was able to claim overall victory at the 1947 Turin Grand Prix. This was the first ever international win for Ferrari, and of the two 159Ss, one was scrapped for parts and the other was made into 166 Spider Corsa, which raced in the 1948 season and is to this day the oldest remaining Ferrari.
All right, that was another good one, and I have to say another big thanks to Chris for those brakes. They are fantastic. I am really looking forward to putting them all on. And we're getting there on the pedals. There's still a bit of stuff to do. I'll show you some of the other issues that I've come across since putting that in next week. But
you mean it's not all plain sailing? You mean there's issues cropping up?
There may be other stuff that I have to redo, which is strange for me. Not really.
Why do it once properly when you could do it 20 times?
Yeah, exactly. So,
please like and subscribe if you haven't, and if you'd like to follow us a day earlier, Patreon, and it supports the builds, and you get to watch without ads.
Yep.
Day early.
Day early, ad free, and all the rest of the stuff. Facebook, Instagram, Homebuilt by Jeff everywhere, and Mrs. Jeff on Instagram.
Yes. Very fledgling enterprise. Have you hit 10,000 yet on Instagram?
I just hit 10,000 on Instagram, which is, I don't really post that much, but you should follow. Anyway, we'll see you next time. See you guys.
It was bored and stroked. What? Live axle rear end and drum brakes all around. This doesn't even sound like English. A 5-speed manual transmission. Was it steel leaf? The steel tube front car had a 5-speed
frame car.
Oops. The steel tube with live spring rear axle brakes in the rear end axles. Drum brakes all round.
Yes! Holy moly, that took a lot.
Wow.